I'm going to talk about our work in innovation, and I'm going to try to keep it as interesting as possible. We talk about our work in innovation as accelerating innovation for development. We are a nearly 100-year-old private foundation, which means we basically give grant money away, and we basically give money on issues of poverty. And we primarily focus outside of the United States, so sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and a little bit of work in the US, but mostly outside. So when we think of innovation, we think about it in terms of the issues that we care about, and so that's the perspective that I'm going to talk about today. But I do think it's applicable regardless of whether you're talking about an issue of poverty or another issue or problem that you're working on. So I'm going to really quickly talk about what I see as the kind of challenges that we face today. So why is this important? What the opportunity is, theory, the approaches we've been funding, the lessons we've learned, because we've now been funding in this area for about 3 years, and we have, I think, some positive lessons and some not so positive lessons, and what I think all of us can do from our different places that we sit here today. So, problems today. This is what I think is the great motivator for this and why I'm here today, which is the kinds of problems that we are facing today. And I would describe them kind of universally as incredibly complex, very difficult, multi-sector, requiring multiple solutions, not one solution. And I just want to run through a couple of examples to illustrate that. Climate change, right? We all understand what that problem is. If you think about the solutions that are going to be required to address it, you've got everything from carbon markets to dealing with the impacts of droughts, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, and the impacts that that's going to have on the availability of food, to alternative energy, right? None of those solutions are coming from a single sector. None of those solutions are coming from a single place, and they are all complex. Maternal mortality, right? A problem we've been dealing with for hundreds of years and still have not managed to make a sizable impact on. Again, if you think about the solutions around how we start to reduce maternal mortality, you need clinics, clinics in accessible places, low-cost clinics. You need education of girls and women. Again, not a simple answer. And finally, you need things as mundane as roads, right? One of the biggest barriers to reducing maternal mortality is getting women to the services and the places they need to be at the time that they need to be there. And roads are one of the major barriers, or lack of roads are one of the major barriers to why that doesn't happen. Third problem, global recession. I think we all are experiencing this both professionally and personally. And again, not an easy set of solutions, not an easy set of answers. You've got everything from government stimulus, obviously big dollars going into that, or euros, or whatever your currency may be. A need to start new businesses in new places to really restart employment, and things like an incredible burden on the social sector to provide services, whether that social sector is in the US and NGOs, or in the case of Europe, maybe through government, but a real need to accelerate and expand the level of services to deal with the pain that this recession has caused. So, what do they all have in common? These are all, as I said, interconnected, global, multi-sectoral, incredibly expensive problems. And so what does that mean in terms of the kinds of solutions that we need to find? They need to be multidisciplinary. They all have technology aspects. They all have aspects of social systems. They all need policy. We need more money than the Rockefeller Foundation has, more money than any of us kind of together in this room have. We need public, private, and nonprofit sectors working together. This is not going to be a solution that's located within one sector. And it obviously goes beyond the boundaries of any single institution in terms of what the solutions are. So that's how I start with this question. These are the kinds of problems that I think we need to address, and what does that require? What does that mean for innovation? What it means is that we need, it's skipping a slide. So what that's supposed to say is that we have a whole set of toolkits, right? We have a toolkit of traditional innovation approaches, research and development, experts, focused institutions that we've tended to fund and support in order to deal with these problems, but we also need new things. We also need new approaches, and that's what we've been focused on in our funding. Approaches like open innovation, user-centered innovation, user-defined innovation, all of which I think need to be tested against these kinds of problems, applied and scaled up where they work and where they're relevant. And that's what our initiative has been about. So our initiative, when I say innovation, is not about a what, it's not about a thing, it is about a how. It is about how do organizations and individuals innovate, and how do we take what we understand to be successful and apply it against the series of problems that we're having such difficulty solving. So that is what our work is about. And now I'm going to take, there's the toolbox. I'm going to take and talk through a little bit of theory. And for all the academics in the room, this is not real theory. This is just how I think about this. So please don't ask me a tough question later about how I developed this theory, because it's not theory. This is just the picture that I see in my mind when I think about these things, and so I always find it helpful to share those pictures with you if I possibly can. And since I'm a former consultant, you'll see the picture takes the form of a matrix, because that's how I think. So theory, for me, innovation is about problem solving, and it is about who solves the problem. And what I think is really interesting about innovation today, it is we are changing the definition of who solves the problem. And what we're changing it from, I think, is a definition that was focused on an institution or a particular set of defined individuals, and adding others in, and in some cases adding the users, or in the case of business, the customer in. Now, I don't think, and I don't mean to, by having an arrow, to suggest that the user is the endpoint and the user should be solving all the problems, but I think this movement toward incorporating others and users into the problem-solving process is incredibly important, and is what is so interesting about some of these new innovation models. And what some of the technology has allowed us to do is to incorporate these at a much lower cost, much higher efficiency than we were able to in the past. So here's the matrix. So I think of problem solving as 3 steps, again, high level. Somebody needs to define the problem, somebody needs to help solve it, and somebody needs to decide which solution you want to scale up. So, using my highly impressive 3x3 matrix, if I think of traditional innovation, so R&D departments, experts, the way most institutions tend to innovate, it is a very institution-dominated approach. And I don't mean literally often within the boundaries of that institution, it's also using that institution's networks, using the experts in the field to help do the innovation. So that's traditional innovation for me. Open innovation, which is really about asking other people to help solve a problem, is really pushing that box in the participation in the solution process into the other. And it's into the people you can't predefine, but you are throwing it open to all of those people. When you think about user-centered innovation, and this, I think, was a great presentation by Jocelyn this morning, the kind of stuff that IDEO does, it is really about bringing the user fully into the picture. But you still have the institution there, right? You still have the institution who is, at least at the beginning, helping to define and throughout the process helping to solve and define the solution. Where I think it gets really interesting is when we start talking about user-defined innovation, which is really about the user owning the process. They're the ones defining the problem, they're the ones making the solutions, and they're the ones choosing the answers. And all the institution is doing in this system of innovation is identifying those solutions and helping to scale them up. And that's really interesting. I don't think any one of these is the way to innovate, but having this fuller toolbox of approaches is what gets so exciting. So I'm going to run really quickly through each of these 3 types just to explain what they are and who does them and what we've learned so far. So we've done funding in each of these 3 areas. The first area is open innovation. I think of this as asking everybody. Right? So this is, I have a problem I'm working on. Instead of calling the people I know, instead of talking to the expert in the field in which that problem is defined, I actually ask everybody. And so the way people typically do this is through competitions and prizes, right? So the X Prize is probably the most famous example of that. There are tons of competitions, tons of prizes. It's a really effective way of asking those who you don't think may have an answer to give you an answer. It removes bias. You can't say, I only want to ask educated people, right? Uneducated people can answer. It removes geographical bias, right? You can get people from all different places, all different industries, all different expertise. We've funded a couple of different experiments in this area. One is Innocentive, and we've worked a lot with Global Giving, who is Maria right here. And that is an online platform that, again, kind of it defines a very specific problem, but then literally opens it up to about 150,000 people across the world who have registered to solve problems, and is a really effective and efficient way of solving very specific problems in an open approach. The other area we funded, and this is Changemakers, which is an initiative of Ashoka, and that is what I would call much more of a collaborative competition model, and it's focused much more on social problems and process and policy type problems than the more kind of product-focused questions that Innocentive tends to be good at. So what we've learned from this, a couple of different things. One is that both of the approaches, both of this kind of model of innovation, tends to be pretty effective. It brings new answers, and it actually helps, in many cases, the institution redefine the problem that they're solving. It gives them insights that help them rethink what their problem is. There is a challenge here, at least that we've seen in the last 3 years, and that's, I frame it as a challenge around quality. So one of the things that happened in our Innocentive experiment, Innocentive typically with its corporate clients gets a solution rate of about 30%. We found in our funding, we have a 100% solution rate. Now, I would love to say that's because we just picked the greatest questions and it attracted so many people and that's why we got such a great solution rate. I think the real answer is probably that the NGOs who are asking problems on the platform don't have the problem definition skills and don't have the solution landscape that a typical person asking on this platform has. So for me, it suggests a real need around investing in the capacity of NGOs, government entities, because I would guess that this is probably true of governments too, to help them actually really define what is the problem they're trying to solve and to understand in a much broader landscape area what solutions are already out there and exist before they do this type of innovation approach. So that's some of the challenges around that one. The user-centered innovation I'm not going to talk a lot about because Jocelyn did a great job of talking about it this morning. As she said, it's bringing together design, kind of business thinking, user insight, anthropology, ethnography, pretty interesting. We've worked with IDEO, as she said, to do a set of projects, to also do some learning internally around what their business model might look like so they can do it on a sustainable basis. We also recognize that the world of user-centered innovation is not IDEO alone, and so have done a series of other investments with other design thinking types of firms and other organizations that kind of use this approach, one of which was just mentioned in MIT, which is an MIT Innovation Lab. We've also funded that uses a lot of these principles to do this kind of stuff. And again, I think this has shown to be really effective. Some really great answers coming out. Again, some really important insights on how people are framing problems. The challenge on this one is the cost. Most of the people who provide these kinds of services are for-profits, and the cost of this is pretty high. And how we decide which problems would most benefit from this type of approach and which problems wouldn't, and more importantly, what are the sustainable business models? I mean, Jocelyn talked a little bit about this today, but whether it's collaboratives of NGOs who want to use this type of approach, or collaboratives of design folks who can work together in a collaborative way to provide these services so each person is only giving a little bit. I think we really need some more development experimentation in this area. User-defined innovation, as I said, I think this is where it gets really interesting, really exciting. I love this picture, right? because this picture is, for me, what user-defined innovation is, right? This is a ball, because it's not a very clear picture, but this is a ball. It's made out of a plastic bag and some twine. Now, no NGO went out and said to some kids, you know, you really need some more playtime, or, you know, you really could use a new ball, right? Some kid just created this thing, right? And they found a piece of trash, an old plastic bag, and a piece of twine, and they created a new ball, right? And it's pretty well designed, right? Looks like a ball, functions like a ball. It's obviously recyclable. It's pretty simple. It's pretty low cost. I mean, this is a pretty great innovation, right? And it didn't require any institution, any NGO, any funder to develop this thing. And so this is what user-defined innovation is all about, I think. And the challenge on this one is to find those innovations and to scale them up to the level which they are scalable. We've done two big investments in this area. One is Positive Deviance Initiative. The other is Rural Innovation Networks. Rural Innovation Networks works in India. It looks for agricultural innovations, specifically kind of product innovations that people have developed, and helps to commercialize them. Positive Deviance is a much more social approach. It looks for, within a community, the person who is being deviant, who is solving a problem using the same set of resources that everybody else has. The best example of this is there was a fishing village in Vietnam that had high rates of malnutrition. And this group spent a couple of months identifying the family within that village whose children had the highest rate of nutrition, and then studying what that family did. And what they found was that the family, when they were cooking their rice, instead of pulling out the crabs, the little teeny mud crabs that live in the rice paddies, were leaving them in there and cooking them with it. And that additional nutrition actually ended up making a net benefit on their child's overall nutrition. And so what it does is it teaches a community how to identify those positive deviants within the community, and then helps the community to scale those up. I think this stuff is great, right? Lesson learned, really effective solutions because they're done by the user, and so they meet cultural norms, they meet the constraints, they are very applicable to the problem. The big challenge here is scale, right? And we've been talking about this all day. And if I could, a proposition here that maybe the challenge around scale is not about scaling up one or two of these things for the globe, but maybe what this is about to use an overused business phrase, a long tail. So a whole set of small solutions, each of which meets a very small set of communities' needs. And what we need to do is build that long tail out rather than taking one or two of these things and, blowing them out across the globe. And that actually, I think, reframes the scale question and may be much more appropriate for these types of innovations and these types of innovation approaches. So I've talked about lessons learned. Scale is hard. Skills, culture, those are key. Collaboration versus coordination. I see a lot of effective coordination out there, not a lot of great collaboration. I don't think we figured out collaboration. I don't think we figured it out within the sector. I don't think we figured it out across the sector. And I don't think we've got great tools around how to do it, particularly on global issues. And that is increasingly what we are seeing. So that's a challenge I would put to kind of all of us, is how do we start to figure out effective collaboration? I think we need more scalers, not solvers. I really don't think that the answer is another water purification technology. I think the answer is taking the water purification technologies we've got and making them work in the places that they can work, right? And that's the challenge here. New business models. Jocelyn talked about this. We need different business models that actually capitalize on what works and what people are willing to give and what assets that we have. And finally, I think the positive lesson here is that there's real value for everyone in this game. There is real value to these new innovation approaches. There are real gains in effectiveness and efficiency to using them. There is real value, I think, as Jocelyn articulated, for a lot of these providers of these models in terms of what they learn, in terms of what their employees experience. And I think it really helps to push the practice of innovation forward. If we can't apply innovation to our toughest problems, I don't think we're being really innovative. And that's the value. And so how we push this further, I think there's some real excitement here. So I think there's a role for everyone, a funder, to use these approaches both in terms of the grantees that they support and in terms of how they practice themselves. Public sector, again, in terms of the massive amount of services that they provide, the folks that they fund and support. Private sector in terms of both how they work and how they extend their own innovation practices to these kinds of hard challenges. And NGOs in terms of the practices that they use as they work on the problems that they see every day. So that's the end. And I hope you all stayed awake.